Over the past 40 years, China has transformed from an underdeveloped economy into the world's largest manufacturing hub, now fondly referred to as the world's factory. China achieved this monumental feat through a mix of deliberate industrial policies, investment in infrastructure, special economic zones, export drive, and progressive integration into the global economy. China accounts for 30% of global manufacturing output, up from just 3% in 1990, according to World Bank and UNIDO data. China's industrial rise began in 1978, under the leadership of former President Deng Xiaoping, who launched China's reform and opening up policy. The government shifted from a command economy to a market-oriented socialist economy, dismantling inefficient state monopolies, permitting private enterprises and opening the country to foreign investment. One of the most pivotal strategies was the creation of special economic zones. The first four, Shenzhen, Zhuhai, Shantou, and Xiamen, were established in 1980, offering tax incentives, reduced regulation, and infrastructure support to attract foreign direct investment. Shenzhen, for example, grew from a fishing village into a global tech and manufacturing hub with a GDP of over $500 billion by 2024. Cheap and abundant labor, combined with massive infrastructure development like ports, highways, industrial parks, and energy, positioned China as a competitive destination for low-cost manufacturing. A core strategy of China's transformation was export-led industrialization. With a growing network of special economic zones and industrial parks, and a steady inflow of foreign investment from companies like Apple, Nike, GE, and Toyota, China scaled up production of electronics, textiles, toys, and machinery. China's entry into the World Trade Organization in 2001 was a game-changer. It gave Chinese manufacturers access to global markets and signaled to investors that China was committed to global trade norms. Between 2001 and 2010, China's exports rose from $270 billion to $1.6 trillion, growing at an annual average rate of over 20%. During this period, light industry such as garments, furniture, and footwear surged. However, as China accumulated capital and experience, it moved up into electronics and heavy industry. By 2010, China had surpassed Germany to become the world's largest exporter of manufactured goods. Moving up the value chain, from the 2010s to the present, China has focused on industrial upgrading and technological self-sufficiency. Labor costs were rising, and the government recognized the need to avoid the so-called middle-income trap. In 2015, it launched the Made in China 2025 strategy, aiming to dominate advanced industries such as robotics and automation, artificial intelligence, electric vehicles, high-speed rail, semiconductors, and biotechnology. This industrial strategy was supported by massive research and development investments. By 2024, China's gross domestic spending on R&D reached 2.6% of GDP, or $500 billion, second only to the United States. Moreover, the country produced more STEM graduates annually than any other country, providing sufficient pool of talent for China's innovation ecosystem. Key examples of China's industrial success include Huawei and ZTE in telecommunications, BYD and CATL in electric vehicles and battery technology, Haier and Lenovo in home appliances and electronics, and CRRC Corporation, which is the world's largest supplier of high-speed railway transit equipment. China also built entire supply chains to back its export drive. For instance, in the electronics sector, over 70% of the world's smartphones are assembled in China, thanks to complete clusters of component manufacturers, logistics firms, and engineering talent, particularly in cities like Shenzhen, Dongguan, and Suzhou. In addition to the early special economic zones, China developed high-tech industrial development zones and export processing zones all across the country. The Yangtze River Delta, which includes cities like Shanghai, Suzhou, and Hangzhou, and the Pearl River Delta, with Guangzhou and Shenzhen, became global mega-industrial regions. The Bohai Economic Rim, centered around Beijing and Tianjin, complemented them in the north. Each of these zones had its own specialization. Shenzhen focused on electronics and telecoms, Guangzhou on automotive and petrochemicals, and Suzhou on semiconductors and precision machinery. By concentrating related industries in these clusters, China managed to achieve economies of scale and foster deep supplier networks. China currently operates over 2,500 industrial parks and dozens of innovation hubs. China's industrial success powered its economic development. GDP rose from about $150 billion in 1978 to $18.8 trillion in 2024, second only to the United States. Manufacturing's share of GDP has remained above 25%, which is much higher than the 10 to 15% you see in many developed economies. China's exports reached $3.5 trillion in 2024, with major products including electronics, machinery, textiles, and electric vehicles. China produces more steel, cement, aluminum, and consumer electronics than any other country. This industrial strength also created vast numbers of jobs, lifting over 800 million people out of poverty. China's industrial transformation offers several critical lessons for African nations that seek economic development and prosperity. First, state-led strategic economic planning and policy continuity were key. China's transformation was driven by long-term national planning, from Deng Xiaoping's reforms to Made in China 2025. African countries need strong institutional capacity to design, implement, and monitor industrial policies across political cycles, and avoid the frequent policy reversals that undermine economic development efforts. Second, special economic zones served as incubators for reform and growth. African countries like Morocco, with Tangier and Atlantic Free Zones, Nigeria, with Lekki and Lagos Free Zones, Ethiopia, with Hawassa Industrial Park, and South Africa, with TAS's Automotive Economic Zone, are experimenting with this model, but they need to provide better infrastructure, sound industrial policies, and investor incentives to truly replicate China's scale. Third, export drive and global market integration were essential. China's success was tied to integration with the global economy, not isolation. African leaders should develop export-oriented strategies, not just for raw materials, but also for manufactured goods and processed agricultural products. Agreements like the African Continental Free Trade Area must be leveraged to build scale and competitiveness. Fourth, investing in human capital and R&D was crucial. China put a lot of effort into education, vocational training, and research institutions, ensuring a steady flow of talent into its industries. African nations must prioritize STEM education, industrial skills training, and technical universities to build a workforce for tomorrow's industries. And finally, cluster-based industrialization is crucial. Instead of spreading industrial projects thinly across regions, China focused on industry clusters and urban megazones. African nations can also build regionally specialized industrial corridors connected to ports, transport networks, and energy sources. In conclusion, China's transformation into the world's manufacturing powerhouse was not accidental, it was purposefully orchestrated. While China's scale and political context are unique, the challenge for Africa is to adapt these lessons to local contexts, prioritize productivity over politics, and stay the course over decades, not just election cycles. If applied with commitment and coordination, African nations too can rise from poverty to prosperity, not by exporting raw materials, but by building factories, skills, and value chains that serve the global economy. May God bless Africa. Thanks for watching.